Jim, let me ask you a question. I mean, you're a former Secretary of State, Insurance Commissioner, legislator, and I'm just wondering, given your experience in Baton Rouge, can a person with that kind of negativity, in terms of personal negativity, can a person like that just turn it around? And we're not even talking about his his sin baggage. We're just talking about his personality. Can he work together with members of the legislature and others? He hasn't been able to work with anybody, to my knowledge, certainly not in the U.S. Senate, and certainly not anybody who may disagree with him about something.
Well, what he's done is, and that's where, unfortunately, in my opinion, money becomes such a major player. Vitter has a special PAC that, surprising to me, is authorized to spend money on either a federal or Louisiana election. He's raised $1.5 million, and you can give up to $100,000 a person, and that's even being challenged by some of Vitter's lawyers, saying $100,000 is too low a ceiling. You ought to be able to give more than that. I mean, I'm just stunned by what the money does. David Vitter has put money into legislative races. You've got a representative down your way where Jeff lives named Cameron Henry, for example, who rumors are will be the next Speaker of the House if Vitter wins. And Henry has been an anti-Jindal guy, along with another cadre of legislators, all supported by David Vitter. You've got some neutral Republican legislators I've talked to recently. I've got a brother-in-law who's a state representative. And he says, he doesn't really know Vitter that well, but he's going to work with whoever the governor is. So as far as the vindictiveness in the legislature, I think Jeff says, yes, he's made a lot of enemies. I don't see it so much within the legislative ranks, though, quite frankly. So, and let me tell you, when you talk about this guy's got so much baggage you can't win. I was elected Secretary of State in 1991 when the runoff was Edwin Edwards at the lowest ebb of his popularity and David Duke. Now, you talk about two guys that had a lot of baggage, but somebody had to win. So it's a question of whether the Democrats have been inept of exploiting these weaknesses and going on the attack. They have some, just really lymph press releases going out. There's not been an organized effort to undermine Jindal, Vitter in that regard. So if the Democratic Party's not going to do it, which is what you would normally find in many states, it's going to take a John Kennedy or a Jay Darden who put together a fair amount of defensive money or aggressive research money to take on Vitter and to create these doubts in the minds of the average person. So Vitter has some weaknesses, but for those weaknesses to be exploited, it's going to take some bright opposition research and some bright people and a lot of money. And Jeff, that's yet to gel. That's yet to gel.
Jeff, let me ask you this. We're talking about the super PACs. Jim mentioned about the super PAC, his super PAC, Vitter's super PAC, at least, where he has roughly $1.5 million. He doesn't have control over that. But his former attorney and the person who's in charge of the super PAC has gone to the ethics commission and basically is saying, hey, we should have unlimited amount of money from anywhere to be able to contribute to the super PAC for a statewide election where there's a $100,000 limit at this point in time. My question is, does this sound like something a person who was a incredible reformer, who was leading the charge on term limits? And my question is, doesn't that seem kind of out of sync? I mean, term limits is to get the power out of government. And if anything, this is saying, hey, let's get the rich guys in here because they have the power and they can dictate to the voters who is going to be their elected officials. What's your take?
Let me just, if I could respond a little bit to what Jim said. I think Vitter has been elected now twice to statewide office in 2004 and 2010, and neither campaign against Vitter has been what I would call good. And I would say he has been the beneficiary of an absolutely pathetic Democratic Party. And I think in the last election, of course, he ran against Obama, and the issue of his personal scandals didn't even come up. I can't imagine Jay Darden being as inept and ineffective as those previous two candidates who tried to run against him. So I would say that Darden is the best one to try to take advantage of those issues, and I don't think that those personal issues are off the table. I think that they could very well come back up in another election, and I think Darden would be probably the one who would probably be the most effective to go after Vitter on them, because Darden's got a pretty clean record. I also think that Democrats would be wise to just give up the hope of trying to get anyone elected to the position and get behind Darden.
That's really interesting. So, I mean, right now, the only person that has actually said that he's going to run is whom for Democrats?
Well, there's been a pretty bright Democrat who has a lot of respect. If you talk to legislators, they will tell you that John Bell Edwards, who's a state representative over in the Hammond area, his father was a very popular sheriff over there for years, that as far as being an effective legislator, that Edwards is likable. They all like him. He apparently is very competent. He is pretty much jumped out in front of the mantle of being the Democratic candidate. I think he's raised about $250,000, not a lot of money, but at least he's beginning. So I think we're going to have a hard time. I would agree with Jeff, quite frankly. If you want to beat Vitter, the best way to do it is for the Democrats not to have a candidate. I just don't see that happening, though. Edwards seems to be pretty set on running, and he'll raise, when all is said and done, $1 million, and be a fairly viable candidate in the top 3 or 4. Can't win, in my opinion, but he'll be, to some degree, the loyal opposition. Now, the problem it creates for Darden, if Vitter runs strongly on the right, and you have John Bell Edwards in there, you may see the left and the right, as so often happens in our open primary system, be in the runoff, and then in this state being a red state, the Republican, if you take Vitter, for example, would easily be elected.
Jeff, the last question that we're going to take about this issue, and we're just going to take another issue real quick. And my question is, would the state, in your opinion, would the state really support somebody like John Bell Edwards, who is, I believe, quote, progressive, quote, liberal? I mean, is that a possibility at this point in time, given everything we know about the state turning red, raw red?
The party, until they can, their best option is try to work with the Republican that, is most clear in the principles, and that would be Darden.
Okay.